Hey, everybody, welcome back to another fantastic edition of the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. You know, we make it our business to help you take dominion over your money and your life. You could be listening, watching a whole lot of things, but you're here with us. And for that, we want you to know that we are grateful. We are happy to bring you another fantastic episode on your journey to being all that you are supposed to be. You know, sometimes we talk about the money thing. We might be talking about investing or money management or even entrepreneurship. But you know, we love to talk about you. We want you to be who you're supposed to be. And sometimes we have to take a look at how we are moving through life, how we are using our 24 hours, and how we can improve in that area, which will directly impact all the other areas of our life. And so that's what today's episode is going to be focused and geared on. We have a very special guest waiting in the wings. We personally have been a fan of this gentleman's work for a long time, and we are thrilled that we get to talk with him, and you guys get to peep in on the conversation that we're going to have. And I think we'll all come out on the other side a little bit better. We're going to be talking with none other than Carlos Whitaker, and he's going to be helping us learn how to human. That's deep, y'all, but it's something that we need to learn more about. And I think you're going to enjoy it. So as we always tell you, get your pen and your paper ready, or get your notes app open on your iPad. Get ready to take some notes, because I promise you some jewels are about to be dropped. So let's go get Carlos and hear all of his fantastic advice and wisdom for us today. Hey, Carlos, welcome to the His and Her Money Show.
Mr. McNeely, thanks for having me on.
We're super glad to have you on. You've been doing incredible work in various capacities, encouraging people for a very long time. And so we're glad that we get to talk to you on today. But some people, they're being introduced to you for the first time right here and right now. So for them, can you kind of just say hello and let them in on a little bit about what you're all about?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for asking me. I'm grateful first and foremost that you would just spend a couple minutes with me diving into, like you said, how to human, right? I mean, that's a pretty big statement. Someone's going to say, I'm going to teach you how to human. So we'll get into that in a second. But I'm an author. And I write books. This is my 5th book. And I travel speaking on my books. But so besides the author and the speaker thing, I'd say most people know me for just kind of living my life on their screens on Instagram. Like, I share my life pretty publicly, and I share the good and the bad. And I've, I think, come into a space and a season in my life where I probably feel the most called into this space in this season, where I'm helping people navigate difficult conversations in a grace-filled way. And that's what I've been trying to do the last 2 or 3 years. And I feel like I'm just kind of stepping into, just now at 48 years old, I feel like I'm just now stepping into who God has called me to be. And like, who knew it'd take until I was 48 to figure it out? But now, man, I'm having a blast. Everything's blowing up. Everything's growing. The metrics are off the charts. And I'm like, if you'd have told 34-year-old Carlos that he needed to wait until he was 48, I don't think that 34-year-old Carlos would have believed you. But man, I'm having a blast. Things are going great. And I'm just grateful to be able to share a little bit of it with your listeners today.
You have been sharing your life publicly for a long time, even before it was a thing, even before it was trendy, even before people made careers out of it. What was your heart behind that? Always just being transparent, vulnerable in the public square.
Yeah, I'll never forget. It was 2000 and gosh, it was 2000 and maybe 5. I had my very first panic attack. And at the time, I was a worship pastor at a rapidly growing church in Southern California. And I remember when I had my panic attack in 2005, like, I didn't know any person on planet Earth that had ever had a panic attack besides me. Like, I just remember feeling as alone as I've ever been. And I had this blog that I just started writing on in 2005. And I remember thinking, like, well, I mean, I wonder if there's anybody else out there that feels this way. And I wrote about having a panic attack, but being a Christian and being a pastor and struggling. And I'm telling you what, the amount of people that day, I'll never forget that day, the amount of people are like, oh my gosh, me too, me too, me too, me too, me too. It showed me what, how many people are just waiting for permission to share their story. And sometimes all it takes is us sharing our story. So for me, that was like the very beginning of me starting to share regularly the more difficult parts of my life, as well as the fun parts of my life. But I found that sharing the difficult parts of your life and as showing people that you can actually get up from those difficult parts is the thing that I think moves the needle more than any sermon I can preach ever could.
Us on the other side of when we see stories like yours or moments like yours and the steps that you went through or walked out to get to the other side of learning how to get through that. How should we posture ourselves? Because I think sometimes we use stories like that as just pure entertainment. Like, wow, that was amazing that he went from A to Z. But a lot of times when it comes time to apply the lesson that you learn, that maybe I could not have to go through it or go through it as long because I can extract from what you went through. How come we kind of struggle with the application to our own scenarios?
Oh my gosh, how come we struggle? Because we're human, right? Because we want to be comfortable. We don't want to look at the difficult things. I mean, nobody does, right? Yesterday, I put something on my Instagram, where the reason why people like a Hallmark Christmas movie is because like it makes them feel something they're not feeling. Because the reality of our life is we're not living in Hallmark Christmas movies, but we try to we try to pretend, and we try to create moments in our lives that feel that way. So we'll watch a movie for 30 minutes and make us feel good, which is nothing wrong with that. But at the end of the day, I think we just have to admit that we don't want to do hard things, that it is hard to grow. Like growth is difficult, growth is hard. And so the people that you see growing are actually working through difficult things. And I mean, my point of view to anyone listening to this would be, you can take it easy and you can live a vacation life, for the next 10 years, but I promise you, you're not going to grow. I promise you there's not going to be any growth. Like you've got to be broken in order to grow. And I'll also tell you this: brokenness is coming. Okay, if you haven't had it in a minute, it's on its way. So why not prepare yourself now for when the brokenness comes? And that's it. That's all we're asking people to do, is make sure that they're paying attention and getting ready to apply those things from other people's lives, that maybe can help them out.
This is book number 5. You started the journey into authorship with Moment Maker. Now here we are with How to Human. And you said yourself, big, audacious concept. People might hear that and say, "What is he going to help us with our physical fitness? Because this is the temple of the Lord, or are we, or like, what do you want people when they hear and then be intrigued enough to investigate and then go to the next step of picking up the book? What was on your mind back when you were sitting down putting pen? I don't think people put pen to paper anymore, but when you were scripting out the outline for this book.
I mean, I'll tell you what, it was, 2020, that it's like a cuss word to a lot of people. You hear that word and people kind of automatically get triggered. And I just, that was when honestly a lot of my growth started to happen, as far as just my platform and more people paying attention to what I was saying. And I found myself having a lot of very difficult conversation, whether it be about racism, whether it be about politics, whatever it was, in what I felt like was very safe and grace filled ways. And suddenly I realized that there weren't a lot of people anymore that were actually having empathetic and curious conversations with each other. Everything was like, draw a line in the sand. If you believe this, then I'm going to listen to you. If you don't believe this, then I'm not going to listen to you. And oh, suddenly I looked around and I was like, I feel like we've forgotten how to human. Like we've forgotten how it is to do this thing. And we just got knocked off 1 degree, just like 1 degree. And my dad used to always tell me, if a ship gets knocked off 1 degree in 10 miles, it's not even going to look like it's going the wrong direction. But in 100 miles, it's going to be 15 miles off. And so, like, I began to write this book because I saw humanity get knocked off. Because, listen, we're all pandemic rookies and none of us have ever gone through one before. So let's give ourselves some grace. But we got knocked off a little bit. So, what I did, I'm not the expert in humanity. Okay. So, you're not going to pick this book up and Carlos is going to be like, here's Carlos's 3 tips on. No, what I do is I take the person of Jesus. There's been a lot of books written on the divinity of Jesus, lots of books. I'm not smart enough to write those books. But what I decided to do was to look at the humanity of Jesus. And so what that does, I feel like it makes it safe. I've got a lot of non-Christian followers that follow me. They know that I am a Jesus loving, Holy Spirit filled, blood of the cross guy. Like they know that about me. But also you can read this book and just look at Jesus as a human. you don't even have to think he's God like I think he's God, and he still wins like the Human of Forever award. So why not take our cues from him? And so, yeah, in the book, I use just various stories of Jesus's humanity, and maybe help us realign with how it is to human again.
How difficult was this for you, the journey, not necessarily the writing? I know it's an extremely, I know enough authors to know it's extremely difficult undertaking to write a book, but how tough was it for you to live out the content of the pages? Because being on opposite sides of someone from any viewpoint, whether that's faith or like you said, politics or just worldviews in general, it's super easy to judge, condemn, cut off, and it's super hard to be graceful and empathetic.
Yeah. Yeah. I I laugh because like on my phone, it's real easy for me to put up a video telling you how to human. So easy. Listen, 3 steps: be human, see humans, free humans. Like there it is. You got the whole book right now. That's it. You got to see people and free people over and over. Real easy for me to say that to a phone. But to live it, like as I was writing this book, I just was like, what am I doing? Because now like I have to apply everything I'm writing in my life. And there were a lot of people that I could not stand after what I saw them post on Facebook. I mean, people I used to love that now suddenly like my blood would boil when I would just see them pop up on my feed. Suddenly, one of the main phrases of the book that I use a lot is don't stand on issues, but walk with people. I say it over and over again. Don't stand on issues, walk with people. When somebody asks me as a public facing brand or person, Carlos, where do you stand on this issue? I say it all the time. I don't stand on issues. I walk with people. So that was a really fun phrase to say and to put on a t-shirt, but to live it is so difficult. But in the long run, it has proven that phrase has proven to be more life-giving to me than any other cliche phrase that I say, because it takes work, but on the other side of work are wonderful, incredible relationships that you can have with people that don't look like you, think like you, vote like you, talk like you, eat like you. If we are just sitting in these silos and in these bubbles of people that just believe the same way we believe, there's no more growth. And as in How to Human, I'm trying to help people grow. I tell a story in the book where when I was a little kid, I saw a kid get kidnapped, like right in front of me. Like I saw it. I was in the barber's chair, and I saw. So I was like 5 years old, little black kid in Atlanta, Georgia, and I saw these like the guy come running by, and then I saw like this big black man come chasing after the kidnapper. And all from like a barber seat chair. And I'll never forget it. And then I saw like 2 skinny redneck looking dudes with mullets come chasing after him. And then I saw a white guy in a business suit chasing, and all these different men were chasing after the kidnapper. And then my barber dropped the clippers and took off chasing. And I remember, not then, but now thinking about it. And after the cops caught him, because they caught him in the mall, everybody looked differently. Everybody looked, and nobody like came together before they chased after the kidnapper and said, hey, before I chase after him with you, can you tell me your view on this? No. What did everybody do? Everybody ran, because intrinsically as humans, I believe it is built into all of our DNA as a reflex to chase after and to rescue. And it's inside all of us. And so I think back to that story, and I think back to like, man, these people probably would not get along at all. Maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't. But guess what? Inside of them intrinsically was something that caused them to run after the bad guy and rescue. And I feel like that's deep inside all of us. And all this book is trying to remind us and pull that back out again.
Imagine a life where your money isn't strangled by mortgage payments. Imagine what you could do when you don't have to send them money that you work so hard for. Come get simple, powerful, and real solutions to eliminating monthly mortgage payments forever. America's #1 money couple presents Crush My Mortgage. In this exclusive course, you will be equipped with strategies to help you move faster toward the promised land of owning your house free and clear. Learn strategies to help you in the areas of payment acceleration, extra income generation, transformation, and wealth creation, all to help you crush your mortgage. Visit crushmymortgage.com and get started today. Join us on the path to power, freedom, and legacy. That's crushmymortgage.com.
Some people are probably going to say, like, what difference can I make? Okay, if I pursue what you're teaching me inside How to Human, and I try to be a difference maker in my world, can I really have an impact? Is it really worth the effort? Because this world is so messed up and people's viewpoints are so entrenched. Can little old me, is it worth the effort on my part to learn how to be a better human so that I can interact with people in a more grace-filled way?
To the TSA worker that you see tomorrow morning when you listen to this podcast, or the next time you get on a plane, that every single other human that passes by them is ignoring or frustrated with, and you look at them and say, Mr. Hopkins, thank you so much for what you've done today. Thank you for making me a little safer as I fly. To that one person, you've changed their entire day. So yes, every single day that we have an opportunity to see people for who they are, and then to give them a little bit of freedom. If the only freedom that TSA worker gets is like feeling a little bit lighter because, oh my gosh, somebody like recognized what I did and they're not yelling at me. Like, it's those tiny moments. Like, we don't have to, like, on my social media, like, I raise a lot of money. We've raised like $2.7 million in Venmo donations for strangers, right? So like people come together. I'm like, we're donating money. We're giving people all this financial freedom. But that you don't have to be doing that in order to literally human and change somebody's life every single day. If you got $2.50 to spare to buy somebody behind you their Starbucks, I mean, it may be $5 these days. Who knows how much a Starbucks drink is, right? Then do that, like free them. And so just all day long, just think about the small, tiny moments that you can create for somebody else that's going to give them a little bit of breath. Absolutely, the single person that's listening to this right now can absolutely affect somebody's life.
I can identify with some of the things you've said thus far, because I pre-pandemic, there was a lot of people, especially, let's be specific, in the faith community, that I really like looked up to and consumed content. And then 2020 came, and I was like,
okay,
here comes the real you. Okay. And it really did shift my perspective. I really did unfollow some folks. I really did stop consuming some people's content. How do we bring it back? Right?
Yeah.
Because it's one thing if I would have read your book in those moments, but in some situations, I've already written some people off. I've already said, you know what, me and you we don't see eye to eye, so I'm not going to mess with you. How do we run it back with grace?
Yeah. No, that's such an important conversation, because, and let's be honest, like, some things, I'm going to give you kind of two perspectives here. Some things that you see will never be unseen. Okay. So let's go ahead and know that, like, you can never unsee or unhear their point of view. Right. But what you can do, if you have the relational bandwidth or the capacity to do it. I'm not saying everybody is called to enter into deep relationships with people that they don't agree with, but I know that a lot of viewpoints that I saw from people that I used to admire, that suddenly I'm like, I cannot believe, a lot of those viewpoints were literally coming from two places: a place of ignorance and a place of trauma. And so, like, a lot of these viewpoints that injure us are actually coming from an injury themselves in those people. So there's traumatic spaces that people form their points of view, their bias, all of these things inside of. So I think when I began to understand that, I was like, okay, they're coming from a real place of trauma from these people. And what that does is it creates some empathy inside of me. It creates some curiosity inside of me. And then the second thing to do is, like, I mean, here's the clearest example I can give. My best friend on planet Earth, we've been best friends since we were 18 years old in college. 18 years old. We never talked about politics. We never talked about any of these things. We just talked about the Falcons and how miserable we are as Atlanta Falcon fans, right? Like that. That's it. Then comes 2020. Then I'm teaching on, just like racism and all kinds of things on my Instagram. And I don't know, 2021 comes around and I'm like, man, how come Eric hasn't hit me up? Like, he hasn't. And I looked and he'd unfollowed me on Instagram. And I was like, what? And then I'm like, so I go to his, And I realized, well, I unfollowed him too. And I'm seeing all these posts where I'm like, no way he believes that. No, not my best friend, not Eric, no way. And so I wrote him off. Like, I'm like, he wrote me off and I wrote him off. I guess that's it. And then my wife tells me in late 2021, she's like, hey, we're the Edwards are coming over for dinner. And I was like, what? I was like, you didn't ask me that. He's like, well, because she doesn't know. She doesn't know any of this. I was like, she's like, what's wrong? And I was like, well, like, we don't really talk anymore. She's like, he's been your best friend since you were 18. What are you talking about? So listen, he comes over to my house and I share this in the book. Okay. So like, this is public information. He lets me talk about this. He comes over and literally, like, we can't small talk for 5 seconds before finally I'm like, hey dude, so what's going on? Like, what's happening here? And he goes, I don't even know who you are anymore. I can't believe you're always posting about racism. He's like, you're not even black. This is what my best friend tells me, right? And so I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, this man has seen my father, who is a black Panamanian from Colón, Panama. But this is where I knew the ignorance plays in, because my best friend Eric did not realize, and this was, I felt like I had not educated him, that black people did not just go from Africa to America. They got dropped off all around the world. So there's black people that speak Spanish. There's black people that speak Italian, right? And as I'm explaining this to him, literally I'm watching his jaw drop and he's like, oh, I mean, I guess you're right, right? Like, this is my best friend that didn't realize that my dad, who's black, can be black and not speak English, right? And so like all of these things, these realizations began to happen when we started to have these difficult conversations. And that night, man, we cried. I showed him some things. I said, I apologize for not letting you into the black part of who I am. He apologized to me for some things. And I said, hey, listen, we're probably not going to agree politically on a lot of things, but let's do this together. We bought Nashville SC, which is our MLS soccer club here in Nashville. We bought season tickets together. And what do? Every week, we show up and sit right next to each other and we root for the same thing. And what I tell people all the time is, find something that you can root for together. And guess what? That began to heal our hearts. We began to come back together. And that's what it looks like to not stand on issues, but walk with people. Just because you're not standing on issues doesn't mean that you don't have an opinion on an issue. But what it does show is that you can continue to walk with people that may not agree with you. And I think that healing can take place. I think we have to remember that their viewpoint on whatever hot topic or big issue it is, their viewpoint is not their whole definition. Like that is not who they are. That is something they think about something, but it's not the totality of who they are. You know, my wife and I did a podcast recording. The most listened to podcast on my podcast the last 2 years was I can't remember what I titled it, but it basically was like how to live with somebody that has opposing viewpoints on hot topics with you. So I'm like, I live with my wife. I love my wife. I'm married to my wife. And we actually disagree. And at the point, it was like we disagreed about, it had something to do with COVID or masks or something. I was like, and that when everyone was screaming about that, like we vehemently disagreed on certain things. And I'm like, if I can't figure this out with my own spouse, right? Like, guess what? I still love her. I'm going to have to do this. And so I think sometimes we look at our other relationships and not the ones that are close to us. And sometimes we forget that we actually disagree on some pretty big things with people that we love and we interact with every single day. So, but what we can't do is characterize their entirety of their humanity on that one thing. If I were to characterize my wife on one opinion she has about something I vehemently disagree with, then I would be missing 99.9% of the rest of who she is. So I have to start realizing that when we disagree with somebody about something big, that really, honestly, although it may feel big in the moment because our emotions are big and we're humans and we feel things very big, that's really a tiny, tiny, tiny piece of who they really are. And we just have to keep reminding ourselves of that truth.
Good tip. Now, earlier you said, when you were first coming across people that you viewed one way, and then they started kind of revealing their heart in certain areas, and you said that you found that it usually came from one or two places: ignorance or trauma. I think we kind of dealt with the ignorance piece, and you gave the example how you educated your best friend on some things. How do we deal with troubling conversations rooted in trauma? Somebody hurt me. Somebody did me wrong. Somebody wasn't there for me. And that caused the division. That causes the divide. Now you're asking me to see them empathetically, see them gracefully. I don't know if I can do that, Carlos. What's your advice to that person?
Yeah, no, it's hard, and especially if it's coming from a place of woundedness as opposed to ignorance, it's a lot deeper, a lot deeper. It's going to be, so much harder to pull them out of that space. And so, I guess my only advice to that would be, it is not your responsibility to pull them out of that trauma. It's not your responsibility to pull them out of that place of woundedness. It's actually not even your responsibility to be friends with them if you don't want to. But I believe we have all been called as humans. I believe we're created in God's image. If we were truly created in God's image, truly created to model our lives after Jesus, that's not a comfortable thing to do. Now, that means we're suddenly going to have to not only just be friends with and tolerate people that have opposing views from us because it comes from a place of trauma, but actually like lean in and love them in spite of how we feel. Quick example, and this example is of my own trauma and bias. So when I moved down to my street here in Nashville, Tennessee, it's a street. We are the only family of color on our entire street. So we move in. So I'm making friends with all my neighbors, but there's one crotchety old white man that lived across the street from me. He would never say hi to me. He had a big American flag on his front door. And let me go ahead and tell you, I began to paint a picture of this man that didn't like me and would never talk to me, because every single time I've been called the N-word in Nashville, Tennessee, which is 7 times in the last 10 years, every single time it's been by an old white man with an American flag on his person or his bumper of his vehicle. And so what did that do? That painted a picture. That trauma, which is a real trauma, painted a picture and developed my bias towards old white men in the South. So I immediately painted a picture of that man. For 5 years, never said a word to him. And then one day I see this old man come out of his front yard with a can of paint. And he had these 2 white porcelain bunnies in his front yard. And this was summer of 2020. Like those statues that your grandma has in her backyard, like those kind of things. And he pulls the paintbrush and he starts painting one of them black. And I remember thinking like, oh, it must be like World War II, paint your bunny black day. Man, I don't know what this is. Like, this seems kind of weird. But then like he leaves one of them painted black and the other one white, and he walked back in his house. And I was like, well, that's interesting. I wonder why he did that. And then I started thinking, well, I could ask him. And then I started thinking, well, I've actually never walked all the way across the street to ask him anything. It's kind of weird. So my heart started pounding. I started recording on my phone because y'all know 2020, I was recording every interaction I had with a possible hostile environment. So I'm recording. I walk across the street to this man that I had written a story about, and my trauma had written a story about him. And I said, hey, excuse me, sir, my name's Carlos. I live across the street. He's like, oh, my name's James. I've lived here since 1956. And suddenly he had a smile on his face that I'd not seen in 5 years. I said, why'd you paint that bunny black? And he goes, oh, with everything that's going on in America, he's like, I'm too scared to get COVID, so I can't go downtown to march. But my when I was a little boy, my parents hired a maid, a black woman, and she raised me. She taught me how to brush my teeth. She taught me my ABCs. I can't imagine anybody looking at you any different because of the color of your skin. So this is my way of saying I painted one black and left the other one white, that your life matters. And can I tell you something? My jaw hit the floor. And I realized that my trauma had painted a picture of somebody else that wasn't true. So if that can be the case for me, it just opened my eyes to be like, listen, everybody else that has these wrong points of view, if they're painted with trauma, it feels real to them because maybe they've had something real happen in their life, but that doesn't mean that they're not this close to overcoming that if all you do is just walk across the street. Sometimes it's all it takes is just walking up and getting close to somebody.
Great story. As you can see, you need this book just because Carlos has the best stories. Uh, but I'm curious, as you did your work and your research, did anything strike you, or because you've been in church a long time, did you find out anything about the humanity of Jesus that surprised you, that changed you, that made you want to be better?
Yeah, I think probably the most surprising thing as I was looking at just the humanity of Jesus is how many stories. This is what surprised me just about really the evangelical church that I was grew up in and a part of, that I feel like the humanity was actually left out of so many stories of Jesus. Like even not even the deep things, but even the fun parts of Jesus, right? Like when Jesus is resurrected and he's and two of his disciples, like they're totally depressed because they think he's been murdered and they don't know what's happened. They're walking down the road to Emmaus, and it says that Jesus walks up to them. And I love this human part of Jesus. It says that he walks up to them and he disguised himself. Like, to me, I'm like, if you were Jesus, I'd have been like, boys, I'm here. Like, can you believe it? But it actually said that he disguised himself. And so I started thinking to myself, like, well, how did he do that? Like, what did he look like? Like what did he do to disguise himself? And suddenly that story became so much more human. And then it said that he pretended to keep walking and waited for them to invite them to his house. So like he's like playing some pranks on them. He shows up to their house. Like, Jesus was fun. A lot of this book, yeah, we talk about heavy things, but I talk about the fun parts of Jesus, that the overwhelming extravagant giving of Jesus, like what it feels like to just give. You talk about money on your show, and I'm sure you've talked about what it does to us when we actually are able to make enough money that we can give to somebody else, and how Jesus just gives extravagantly. When he turned water into wine, it wasn't just a wine glass, it was like more wine. It was enough wine to have a wedding for like a month, right? So it's just like, no, I know we only have another day of this wedding, but here's a month worth of wine, right? Like, he just gave extravagantly. So it was those things when I was studying the life of Jesus that surprised me, of how fun, how big, how whimsical of a Jesus he really was.
Tell everybody a little bit more about what they'll find in the pages of How to Human.
Yeah. So in the pages of How to Human, you're going to find, and I think it's going to be purposely a little bit uncomfortable. It's going to make us look at ourselves in a way. It's like, oh man, Carlos, like, I don't know if I want to work on that, but I feel like because I've figured out a way, at least on social media, to have these conversations in safe ways. Everyone that reads this book is going to feel very safe, but maybe challenged a little bit to make your life look a little bit more like Jesus. And I'm going to give us some handlebars on how to do the three things, right? Be human, see humans, and free humans. That's literally it. That's how we do this. I feel like that's how we course correct that 1 degree that we've maybe bumped off. Yeah. And so I'm going to give you tips. I'm going to give you encouragement. But I think more than anything, this book is going to serve as a reminder that it's already in you and you already know how to do it. Maybe you just need Carlos to come by and say, hey, remember, this is what it was like before, and maybe help us get back to that place.
Before we let you go, I'm curious, because you're not only a husband, you're a father. How have you imparted some of these wisdom truths to your children in order to kind of help them on their journey? Because I believe, being a father myself, that my kids have more challenges, more stimuli. Now they have to worry about the real life potential of bullying. You got to worry about the online potential of bullying. So as they try to interact and be human, it may not be reciprocated, because you're dealing with lower levels of immaturity in the world. And how have you tried to impart some of this wisdom to your kids? Because maybe the parents listening out there will want to learn how to do this for theirs.
So good. No, I think it's really important. What I've done is I've just made sure to have these conversations open and out loud in front of my kids. I feel like a lot of times we feel like, and there's some things we need to shelter our kids from, absolutely. But a lot of times I feel like sometimes we keep our kids away from maybe more difficult conversations because we want them to keep their their youthful exuberance and things like that. And I'll go ahead and tell you something. Either you're going to talk to your kids about some of these hard things, or their friends are going to talk to them about some of these hard things. So why not let us be the example? And so, for my kids, it's fun to watch them. In my son, he works at Chick-fil-A. He had an interaction with a older coworker, like in his 30s. My son's 16 years old. That left him a little bit like, bruised up his ego a little bit. And I asked him, like, hey, like, how are you going to deal with that? Like, what are you going to do tomorrow? And he goes, you know what, Dad? he may have had like a horrible day at home. Like, I don't know what's happening in his life. Maybe his wife's sick. Maybe some of his, and I'm sitting here going like, is this my 16-year-old son acting like, like he's more mature than I actually give him credit for? And so our kids are watching. And I just think that there's our children's pastor at my church says this. I want to make sure I say this right. And this is maybe the phrase that people can grab a hold of. But he said, when it comes to parenting your kids, way more things that you parent them with are caught than they're taught. And so our kids are going to be catching things a lot more than you're going to be teaching them things. And so just remember that, way more of parenting is caught than taught. So don't be trying to like teach your kids lessons all the time. Just let them catch the truth and the reality of how you're living on a daily basis. They're going to follow your lead a lot more than they're going to listen to what you have to say.
If people haven't already been doing so, they need to be following you on social media. So how do they do that?
Yeah, at Loswhit, LOSWHIT, at all the places. Instagram's the place where I try to do things the most. Twitter, I tell people follow me on Twitter second because I complain on Twitter a little bit more than I do on Instagram. But no, I love all the places, and I'm just out there trying to deal hope every day.
Now, before we land this plane, there may be somebody who's on the fence. They're like, listen, this sounds like a lot. I'm more comfortable with being on the sidelines of this, and I'm more comfortable with being in my bubble on this topic. I don't know, Carlos. Why do you want me to push out here into an uncomfortable place and learn how to human and learn how to better engage with people that think differently than me? What would be your words of encouragement for that person after they go and pick up your new book, How to Human?
Yeah, I would just encourage everybody that may be sitting in that space. Listen, I was at that space when I was writing it. Like, I was like, do I really want to turn this book in? Because then I'm going to have to talk to Mr. McNeely. I'm going to have to get on people's podcasts and tell them, like, trust me, on the other side of comfort is growth. On the other side of comfort is healing. There's things that I think in this book are going to actually heal some spaces inside of you that maybe you didn't even know needed healing. And so, I just think that I believe big time in this book. I believe in the message of this book. I believe that it was written for such a time as this. And I believe that anyone that picks this book up is going to be on the front lines of seeing our community and our culture heal from so much pain that it's been through the last few years. And wouldn't you rather be on the side that like said, hey, listen, I'm going to help heal, as opposed to just wait and let somebody else help heal me? No, I think that we can be the healers and we can be the ones stepping forward.
The book is called How to Human. Our guest today is the author, Carlos Whitaker. Carlos, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule and breaking this wisdom down for us all to consume today.
Hey, thank you so much, friend. Really appreciate it.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Another fantastic edition of the show is in the books. Speaking of books, How to Human is the name of the book that we've been talking through on today. There's a link in the show notes of this episode. Just click the link, pick up a copy, and let's take this journey together. We all need this. We all need to become better humans because we were sent here with a purpose. Sometimes that purpose involves other people. Sometimes those other people don't see things the way that we see them, but the purpose hasn't changed. So let's all learn how to be a better human so that we can interact with those around us and maybe have an impact on this world that God will be proud of. All right, guys, that's all we got for this time. It's been great. Until next time, peace.